Are you one of those producers that can make pretty good samples, but when compared to other producers who you either look up to or aspire to produce like, your samples just aren't cutting it and you're just not sure what you're missing? Or you're just starting out and you want to get your samples to the point where you can confidently send them out to your weeklies list and know that if they get heard, they're going to stand a pretty good chance of getting placed? Well, in this video, I'm going to reveal the one thing that you can add to your samples right now that's going to make them 10 times better. I'm going to give you an in-depth example of this one thing in action and just show you exactly how it works, along with some complementary tips too. And I'm going to give you an insane free kit so that you've got all the best melodic sounds to start adding this to your arsenal right now. Now, when it comes to sample making, there's a few things to take into consideration, but the main thing, and the thing that I notice a lot of producers getting wrong in their samples, is leaving space. It doesn't matter how simple or how complicated your workflow is, the concept of leaving space still applies. Now, you might have heard this advice in the past, but I'm going to do my best to really show you what this actually looks like. I'm also going to show you some sound selection hacks, arrangement tricks to make your samples just flow more naturally, and a bunch more cool stuff. So I got this authentic kind of sample right here. That part's crazy. I'm going to break this thing down layer by layer just so you can see how to properly utilize space in different ways and just how they can all add together and allow you to make a really nice sounding sample. So let's dive in and we'll start with the first element in this sample, which was just some basic chords. Real simple chords, we're just sticking with basically one chord in this, just a C minor chord in a C minor scale too. But yeah, I took this chords, added a bit of processing, a bit of automation, bounced them out into this layer right here. Wanted to play around with the sound a bit, add some more texture, add some more characteristics to it. So I stretched it and I pitched it up, and this is what we've got. Just this little section here, a little bit different, chopped up a little bit. But focusing in on the space in here, you'll notice that I've added a lot of chops and I've kind of faded out the sample in sections just so we can kind of like play with the volume and make it more dynamic and just make it come alive a little bit more. But you'll notice there's this massive gap right here in the chords. And again, this is just coming back to spacing. Sometimes it's okay to have a chord progression kind of run throughout, but if you really want to sauce it up, then just adding little gaps like this can really open up a lot of space for extra sounds that you can bring in later on. And then the next sound we came in with was just a simple bass. Super simple. Just add a little gap right there. Here. The sound that I went with was this vintage bass. This is like a one shot that I've included with an upcoming kit. Put together 80 real vibey, authentic, rich, sort of warm sounding presets for the Mellotron VST. If you have Analog Lab as well, then this will work perfectly too. And if you don't have either of those plugins, then don't stress because I've rendered the entire kit into a one shot kit as well. You can get a free version of this kit right now. Just hit the first link in the description, enter your email and I'll send it over to you totally free. But yeah, as I said, we used the bass vintage one shot in this. Turn the envelope like this so we've got full control over it. And then once again, coming back to that spacing concept, we've got these little gaps in the keys right here. This just gives the sample a bit more space to breathe. It also adds a bit of rhythm, a bit of swing. Yeah, it just kind of keeps things interesting. Little gap, nice big gap here. So that's the bass. Next element we came in with was the phrases. So I added this phrase from one of my most recent kits, the Plenty Stash kit. Yeah, very subtle, just it's got some nice like high textures in there, just something to give a bit of top end to the sample. But just notice how I'm not just dragging in phrases and just kind of leaving them. It's good to just kind of find pockets and see where the phrase can fit and where you can chop it up and again add more space, allowing us to, you know, create more pockets for extra elements to come in later. I did the exact same thing with another phrase, again just kind of chopped it and added it where I saw fit, left some gaps here and there too. And nothing here, this whole space. We can kind of bring it back here. Now the next sound that we're going to get into is a little bit different. We're still following the concept of adding space, but this next sound is actually going to add as a filler to the spaces that we've already created in the sample. This is a real good trick for using silence to your advantage in your samples. Again, creating space allows us to create silence, and then in those little gaps in those silences we can sprinkle very subtle sounds, which I'll show you with this sound right here. So approaching the gap right here. So you see how just ducking everything out of the way and just making that goozang, the solid focus, is pivotal. It just creates way more emphasis on that one sound. And again, adds more bounce, adds more pockets. It just adds so much more life to the sample. This goozang is another preset from the Mellotron kit. This is the preset. Yeah, I just wanted this real nice tremolo goozang just to add to the kit so you can kind of sprinkle it into your own samples. And by the way, this entire kit, including the free version, every single preset was played by professional session musicians. These aren't just some rinse and recycle presets. Everything is sample based. These were all one shots and phrases that were made specifically for this kit. Completely fresh, brand new sounds, and I can't lie, man, the whole thing sounds crazy. But yeah, moving on. Next up, we came in with some flutes. Now this is where we kind of get into that ethnic kind of vibe, starting with the goozang. Next up with the flute, kind of comes in a little bit later in the sample. Bounced out as a wave file, pitched up a whole octave, added some light distortion to it, bit of decapitator. But yeah, going back to the whole spacing concept, I had this flute playing originally just all the way through this 9-bar like this, which just sound okay. But again, going back to the whole spacing concept, you know, there's a lot going on already. We've got the phrases playing, the bass, you know, like the goozang coming in and out. Yeah, I just thought, again, I want to create some more pockets for this. I really want the flute to shine. I don't want it to kind of just be playing throughout. So again, we just added a little bit of a cut right here, made sure that there was a bit more space, a bit more breathing space, so that when the flute does come in, it's got more impact. It sounds like this. Fades in. It sounds crazy. Next up, we added this guitar riff. This was just pulled from Splice. Kind of Spanishy, it's got that kind of raw feel to it. Notice how we left that gap there as well. So again, just creating more space. This is just the same gap to make space for that goozang. And then the only thing I did with this guitar at the end was just make one unique, reversed it, and then again just use that as kind of like a riser to transition into the B part of the loop. And then after that, just a nice little perk loop. Little gap. Again, just creating more space. And this perk loop's got a lot of space in it anyway, so just stretched it out, warped it even more, pitched it a little bit. Yeah, I was pretty happy with it at that point. And that kind of wraps up the main section of this first part of the sample. Just from a visual perspective, you can just see how all of these little pieces kind of add up and they just kind of accumulate. And yeah, again, just add in those pockets. Before we get to the B section in this sample, I did have this little section right here which acts as like a transition. This is a really cool technique for bringing in new sounds without just having everything start on the 4-bar, you know, on the 1. Just simply adding a little part of the melody right at the end of the 8-bar, introducing it before it's about to come in. It's just a really good way to smoothly transition your sample. This is the luxurious piano 1-shot. This is a preset in the Mellotron kit as well, but I used the 1-shot version. Yeah, I just played up kind of high. I just pitch bended that last note to bring it down a little bit, give it some more uniqueness. Put a little bit of reverb on it, but I didn't want it to play all the way through, so I just kind of added automation and made it cut when the actual piano comes in. So yeah, I did that little transition, and then this is what it transitions into, is this piano right here. Kind of kept the chords similar to like the first part of this melody, but again, man, just took the chords because this was the original pattern. Just kind of repeats. Bounced it out again, wanted to add more texture to it, more vibe, so just use this time dial to stretch it out and play with the bounce. Made a few unique versions of it, reversed it, and just had some of the chords kind of reverse into each other. And as you can see with these chords, they're kind of simple, so we kind of have some inbuilt space with the chords naturally. But I did have another big thing right here, another big empty space right here, just creating more pockets for a little sound which we'll bring in later. And then yeah, second sound was the bass that we had earlier. Gaps. With a gap. Gap. Added those gaps, added that space. I did add a couple of different phrases in this section too, chopped out sections that I didn't like. So this is more like an ethnic phrase. Just solo it. Yeah, just kind of like a vibey acoustic guitar that we had in there. Added another one, another phrase right here. Gap. Play in context. Okay, and that pretty much makes up the entire B section. Now you'll notice that there's one sound muted. Going back to the similar concept that we had with that goozeng earlier, I wanted to follow suit and keep that theme going, but use different sounds, use different textures. And yeah, we achieved that with this sound right here, man. So we've got kind of like a lot of stuff playing. We've got nice gaps and everything going on here. But towards the end, we've got this big, huge gap. If I zoom out, where literally everything ducks out of the way, and we've just got one sound playing. I believe is from the Mellotron kit. I'm plugging this thing like crazy. But yeah, this is the actual sound. Yeah, it's a preset inside of the Mellotron, and I've also, again, bounced out as a one shot. This one little sound, this one little tickly sound just gives the whole thing a vibe, especially with the huge gap that we created. Yeah, I'll play this second section through. You'll see exactly what I mean. Go. Just drops back into it real nice. And then that basically wraps up the whole loop. Yeah, crazy loop, man. And this was all down to spacing. The whole concept of spacing is just something you should really have in the back of your mind whilst you're creating music. It's just something to keep in mind where you're like, how can I clean this up and just create pockets for every individual sound and just make things shine through in the mix. But there is a couple little hacks that I wanted to get into as well. Now, the first thing is sound selection. This isn't about having all the expensive VSTs. This is more of a mindset thing when it comes to sound selection. When I'm creating samples, I kind of already know the style that I want to go for. I'm not too sure about the chords, what different sounds I'm going to use, how many sounds, the arrangement. I don't know any of that at that point, but I know that I'm like, okay, I want to make something ethnic. I want to make something in this style. So as long as you've got that in your head, that needs to be stuck in your head throughout the entire process. Too many times where I hear producers samples that they send through, and it's because, and I can hear it straight away, they've started off with the right mindset. They're thinking, okay, ethnic, I need these kind of sounds. And then over time, they just kind of like fade away from that. Then a bunch of random stuff starts to come in, like synths and just random stuff that isn't ethnic at all. And that leads back to sound selection and just being real clear with the outcome of the sample. Like, how do you want this thing to sound? Okay, so for me, I wanted this to be ethnic. So I was like, okay, start off with some nice, clean, warm sounds to begin with, get a good foundation. Then add a nice, authentic, sort of full, warm sounding bass. Then some like interesting phrases that have got a little bit of an ethnic-y, ambient kind of feel to them. And then really go in with the ethnic vibes. Like, okay, what's an ethnic instrument? Goozeng. What's another ethnic instrument? Flute. Got some nice like upright piano kind of sounds here that come in the B section. What else is ethnic? Some nice plucked strings like a guitar. We've got that in here. So just keeping that in the forefront of your mind and knowing exactly what sounds are going to fit the style that I'm going for, exactly what instruments are going to fit the style that I'm going for. Another little hack, and I kind of mentioned this earlier in the video, is with your arrangement. A lot of producers will normally start off with like an 8-bar right here. So they'll start off with an 8-bar like this, and then maybe they'll bring in something else in this second section, like this and like that. And as you can see, just from a visual standpoint, it's in blocks. So like everything just kind of is restricted to, you know, 8-bar blocks. This is kind of like natural when you're working inside of a DAW like FL Studio. Whereas if you go back and listen to any vintage sounding sample, any old school music, anything that was just actually played by real instruments, real musicians, this hardly ever happens. There's never like many songs where you've just got a solid 8 bar that is just solidly repeating throughout the entire song. There's always new sounds, new chord progressions, new elements that are going to come in and out of the song, and you've got to replicate that in your DAW. You've got to think outside of the DAW and try and recreate it inside the DAW. So coming back to the arrangement, we've got these little sounds right here that act as like transitions. Got that piano sound that I mentioned earlier, so I'm kind of introducing the next part of the sample before it even comes in, so that's what this little section's for. Doing the same thing with the phrases that we used in the A part of the sample, teasing them back at the end of the B part of the sample, just so we can kind of naturally transition back to the beginning. And all of these things accumulate and allow you to make a real clean, flowing, naturally sounding, made, realistic sounding sample. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. But yeah, be sure to take all of this away, start implementing all of these techniques into your own samples, and let me know how you get on in the comments. And again, if you want a bunch of the sounds that I used to make this sample, then hit the first link in the description and pick up a free sample of my Mellotron expansion pack. There's some amazing presets in there, and obviously you got the one-shot versions as well. Obviously it's a condensed version of the full pack, but don't be fooled, all the sounds are still fire in there. The full pack's going to be going live on the 11th of October if you wanted to go ahead and grab the full version. I'll link that below as well once it goes live. And if you want to make an entire beat from scratch that's perfect for placements, then I recommend you check out this video right here. It's got you covered for literally every aspect of the process in that video. Peace.